Welcome back to Navigational Mind. I'm Dr. Toy Oyelese here in Kelowna. And if you've been following our little journey, you know this podcast isn't about conquering your mind. It's about understanding its mysterious and honestly, sometimes unruly architecture. Today we're looking at one of the scariest signs that the inner house can show us: collapse. And right off the bat, I really want to say, collapse isn't a verdict on your moral fiber. It's not about being weak, lazy, or, not pushing hard enough. Collapse is simply what happens when the system, your mind, your emotional resources, gets maxed out. It's like the circuits in a house blowing a fuse. It's structural, not personal. I love that inner house metaphor we've circled back to a few times on the show. When collapse hits, the very things that give the house life, direction and articulation, seem to vanish. Upstairs, where the voices and residents normally discuss and negotiate and create meaning, goes oddly quiet. Sometimes it's like all of them start talking at once and nobody can hear a thing, and then suddenly it's silent. The basement, if you will, the part of the system dealing in raw panic or just numbness, takes over. That's the emotional signature. You feel confused, overwhelmed, sometimes totally fragmented. Like you're walking around but you can't really access your own map. Happens to more people than they'd care to admit. I'll tell you a quick story, just to show this isn't hypothetical. Back during my first big winter as a rural doctor in Alberta, I can still remember that biting wind. I was the only physician for a very, very sick farming community during a flu outbreak. I thought, I've trained for this, I should handle this. But by the third week, I remember sitting alone, feeling totally dissolved. Couldn't think straight, didn't want to talk, barely knew what the next step was supposed to look like. For ages, I told myself, Toy, you failed. Couldn't keep up, got overwhelmed. It's only years later, seeing this pattern time and again in myself and in others, I realized that's not personal regression or weakness. That's a structure running out of capacity. It's predictable. It's almost mechanical, though that doesn't mean it feels any less miserable in the moment. So, what's actually going on inside that house when the collapse starts? It isn't random, and it isn't mysterious, even though it sure feels like it. We can actually break it down into three main structural causes. First, overload. That's when the system, your system, is just handling too much. Too many demands, too much emotional weight. It's the classic camel's back thing, right? Add one more straw and suddenly everything gives. Then there's misalignment. This is sneaky. Maybe you're forcing yourself to march in a direction that a big chunk of your mind, or one of those core residents we've talked about, just doesn't buy into. Say, keeping up an academic program only because your family expects it, even though you're drawn to something else. You end up grinding your gears, and suddenly the gears give out. The third one is structural weakness. So, not having enough anchors, or clear personal rules that keep you steady. If you haven't set up routines, or you don't know what your non-negotiables are, then when stress comes, it's like a house with a shaky foundation. It might look fine until a big wind comes along. And what happens next? Let's use that university student example. Maybe they're juggling family pressure, midterms, big life choices. One by one, the residents inside start to squabble. Responsibility says, study. Autonomy whines, I can't take this anymore. Direction vanishes. Suddenly, there's no clear sense of what matters. The rules that usually keep things orderly don't apply anymore. Eventually, the whole internal system says, we can't do this, and boom, the basement steps in. That's when panic shows up, or, just as often, numbness. Sometimes people think numbness means I'm not affected. No, actually, it means your systems pulled the fire alarm and everyone's hiding behind locked doors. If we follow that sequence, first the internal compass breaks, then the language center, articulation, starts to wobble, and right after that, the rules and anchors fail. The system withdraws. It's protecting itself. Again, predictable, not a moral failure. And oh, if you're in that state, please don't try to force productivity or clarity or to snap out of it. If you try, it's like yanking at a broken circuit. You'll probably just blow another fuse. It's not about pushing through. You've got to stabilize first. Or, to put it in terms of our house metaphor, patch up the roof before you try to redecorate the living room. Here's the encouraging part. Collapse is reversible. The real art is in the rebuild. And I'll be honest, a big chunk of my clinical life has been spent not trying to push people through collapse, but helping them figure out how to start this process. It comes in 4 pretty clear phases. First is stabilization. That's about removing as much load as possible. Cancel things, rest, re-establish a routine, find what little anchors you still have. For me, the moment I finally left that little rural clinic and relocated, everything slowed down. That was stabilization. I needed to stop the avalanche before I could even think about shoveling the snow, if that makes sense. Next is soft articulation. This one's tricky. When you're fragile, you can't jump straight to deep soul searching, but you can start gently naming things. I feel tired. I'm scared. No grand narratives, just honest notes to yourself. It's gentle, no interrogations, just observation. If you're patient with that, you'll notice direction starts to flicker back. A faint sense of, maybe I could try this, or I'm kind of drawn to call that friend. That's direction recovery. Not all at once, just little nudges. The last phase, process resumption. Small, structured steps, nothing heroic. Like, today I'll just send that one email. Or, I'll take a 5-minute walk. Gradually your capacity expands. You rebuild. And honestly, every time someone goes through those phases, stabilization, soft articulation, finding direction, and beginning again, something changes deep down. Anchors get stronger. Rules become clearer, usually simpler. People get less invested in pleasing somebody else or pretending things are all right. They get more honest because the old structures broke and had to be rebuilt on a foundation that actually works for them. The identity reorganizes not around pressure, but around what's true here, now, for me. So how do you know the difference, by the way, between pushing through a collapse and actually starting to rebuild? Let me tell you, it's a fine line, and I've gotten it wrong plenty of times. Usually pushing feels tight, brittle, like you're fighting gravity. Rebuilding feels slow, but somehow steadier, almost like finding your breath again after a sprint. When I finally slowed down and relocated, I felt a growing steadiness. Not all at once, more like, okay, there's still ground beneath me, even if I'm not running. If you walk away with one idea today, let it be this. Collapse is a signal, not a full stop. It just means that the architecture needs some honest renovation, and with patience, you can create a space, a self, that's stronger and kinder. Not a return to the old, but a build towards something wiser and more resilient. I'll be here next time to keep navigating with you. Take care and give your inner house some gentle attention this week.